while we are aware of plastics' impact on environment, health, and climate, still business as usual is continuing. So it is crucial for us to address the root cause of the problem by addressing the entire life cycle of the plastic rather than just trying to find and use the end of pipeline solutions. So this launch of Microsite is not just a digital milestone, but also a call to action to act against the plastic pollution by addressing its entirety. So the event aims to both summarize the new Microsite as well as its resources, and also to mobilize support for holding polluters accountable. So without further ado, let's begin the event, and I would like to invite Swati to set up the context of how and why this microsite born and uh, uh, information related to that. Swati, over to you.
Thanks, Vishita. Just to give a brief introduction to uh, the campaign and the microsite and why we started, uh, this particular process sometime late last year, is that some of us felt that uh, as the Global Plastics Treaty was progressing, we felt that there was a focus, especially in India, much more on the downstream issues where a lot of people were talking about waste management, about the problems with burning, and also with, just in terms of recycling. But there was very little understanding on how plastics is a problem from its source, which is the refining and petrochemicals itself. And that is why we thought we should really build the public opinion and awareness on how plastics are related to fossil fuels. And that's why the logo that you see, which is the logo of the campaign itself, that fossil fuels and plastics are connected, and that plastics is really the plan B for dying fossil fuel, an oil and gas industry. So that was the context with which we had started. We initially thought of a campaign. Why we called it plastics, fuel, and fertility, a lot of people also felt that it was extremely sensationalizing to have such a name. But we felt that while talking about what was common across the lifespan, we realized infertility is actually a commonality across the lifespan, whether it's infertility of people, animals, soil, or any kind of regeneration really comes to an end the minute plastics enters the space, right from the point of the petrochemicals. And therefore we also felt that there was a big nexus between the petrochemical industry and the upstream, the FMCG, or the fast moving consumer goods industry in the midstream, recyclers, waste to energy companies, waste management companies. There was a massive nexus between all of this, and there was a willful suppression of information, willful suppression of impacts of the use of polymers and plastics, and therefore the byline of unearthing myths, hidden truths, and white lies. Um, the objective of this microsite is really to help socialize and help people understand this nexus, to put out what we write, but also to put out what others perhaps write. And while today this is a very short and a quick release that we're doing of the microsite, we hope that we will be able to also encourage more and more people to populate and hold the space eventually. So yeah, this is a very brief introduction about the microsite and the campaign itself. Just to also say finally that in the global plastics treaty space, which is also a kind of context in which we set this up, is that there's a massive attempt by member states to minimize the plastics treaty into a waste management treaty. Unfortunately, India is one of those countries which is trying to do that, and to keep the upstream out of the treaty negotiations completely. And therefore, this need for a campaign, and also to draw attention to people in India as to what the government of India is doing. In fact, as we speak, the intersessional expert group meetings are concluding today after having met for 5 days. And briefly, for what I've heard from what's going on in Bangkok right now, is that the chemicals expert group, the subgroup on chemicals, is seeing a big fight by the upstream countries, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and including China, I mean, and India, of course, to really keep chemicals and petrochemicals out of the treaty, so that plastics eventually will continue being produced as long as the source is still alive. And it's really in that context that we decided to put this campaign together. I can take questions on the campaign towards the end, but yeah, the objective is to disseminate all our learnings, but eventually also have it as a vibrant space to really make the connections between the three or four parts of the plastic death cycle, actually, as the many of us choose to call it. Yep, thanks, and over to you, back to Mishra.
Thank you, Swati. So, as Swati mentioned, so this microsite, I'm just reiterating the point since many have joined little in the middle. So, mainly to unearthing the myths, hidden truths, and white lies about the plastics and plastic pollution. And also, since there are tremendous efforts being taken by the parties to minimize the global plastics treaty to just a waste management treaty by keeping the upstreams away. Swati also mentioned that India is one of the important players who are trying to do all this play in the negotiation thing. So I welcome Paranjoy to speak about how the Indian landscape looks like in terms of the petchems and plastics. So over to you, Paranjoy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, CFA. Thank you for asking me to speak. I'm not really an expert on the subject. I will make a few comments. How long should I speak, please? Vishwaja, will you tell me?
10 to 12 minutes.
10 to 12 minutes. Okay. After 10 minutes, just
I will send you a
just alert me. Okay. I have, thanks to the Center for Financial Accountability and others, had an occasion to work and understand how the petrochemicals landscape in this country, how it has evolved, what it is all about. And I must thank Swati in particular, also Joe, for having given me the opportunity to study this in great detail and also try and understand the intricacies of what has happened. Now, the first part is that India is holding a very prominent position in the global petrochemicals industry. If for nothing else, we happen to be the most populous country on the planet. The second thing is that when you say plastics or petrochemicals, this is cuts across so many sectors that it's really all pervasive. There's hardly any aspect of our lives where we don't use plastic. Packaging, construction, automobiles, textiles, and it's huge. It's really huge because from the most kind of, what should I say, basic items, we are using petrochemicals for just about everything that we are using. I mean, soaps included, and you can go on. I could go on and tell you about all the items that are being using. Okay. Now, the first point to note is that, and this is where I'm going to try and throw some light on on what I know, what I understand. India is not just one of the major players in the global petrochemicals industry, it has already become, it is the largest user, one of the largest users of petrochemical products. And it has grown at a very, very fast pace. And it's only very, very recently that there is a certain amount of awareness that is cropped up within the government and within ordinary persons, the harmful aspects of excessive use of petrochemicals. And as Swati and others, they are better informed than I am. The government says something, but actually does something quite different. And I will request Swati to put together, to put on this microsite all the papers and documents that I've had the opportunity to put together. I would also urge her to put the interview I did with her on the new petrochemicals, on the coal to PVC project that's supposed to come up in Gujarat. I'd also request her to put out there a long interview I did with OP, Om Prakash Singh, an engineer. So these are trying to sort of speak in a somewhat non-technical language, somewhat simple language, what this all means. Now, as the name signifies, over and above the crude oil and its derivatives, now petrochemicals are being used a very, very, very wide range of items. Even corn and biomass, unconventional sources are there to make everything from soaps, detergents, explosives, rubbers, paints. Now, according to the Government of India, the Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, which is within the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, there are at least 12,000 industrial units that are making products using some petrochemical product or the other. And 4 states in India, Gujarat, Maharashtra, both in Western India, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, both in southern India, they account for over 60% of the units that are producing petrochemicals in this country. Now, the other point that needs to be noted is that whereas there are, as we mentioned, 12,000 small industrial units, small, medium, large, not so much large, but medium enterprises which are using petrochemical products, supplies are dominated by a very few people. It's an oligopolistic kind of an industry. If you look at domestic producers, you have Reliance Industries Limited. Reliance Industries Limited, headed by Mukesh Ambani, is India's largest privately owned corporate entity. Though it's an entity, it's actually like a conglomerate. Reliance Industries Limited owns and runs in Jamnagar in Gujarat the world's biggest petroleum refinery. So we are dealing with big players, not just by Indian standards, by international standards. The other major player which is dominating this industry is Indian Oil Corporation, which is owned by the government. It's a government-owned company, public sector. So Reliance and Indian Oil together account for nearly 70% of the domestic production of all chemicals in this. This is a figure that was arrived at a few years ago. I don't think it's changed very significantly. Now, in 2002, Reliance acquired a government-owned company which was called IPCL, Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited. And many people at that time had objected to the Vajpayee government allowing IPCL to become a part of the Reliance corporate conglomerate. What was the logic? They said there's lack of, I mean, we already have a few players, and if there's lack of competition in this sector, then the consumer suffers. At that point of time, the minister was Arun Shori, and he justified it. He said, no, no, we've liberalized imports, so there will be, I mean, the Indian companies will have to behave in a competitive manner, and that therefore that will ensure that the consumers' interests are not hurt. But actually, that did not happen. Over the years, we see that the way in which anti-dumping duties, imposition of customs duties were periodically changed and modified, helped in consolidating these two monopolies. And if any of you are interested in going back in time, in 1988, there was an unauthorized biography of the late Dhirubhai Ambani, the father of Mukesh Ambani and Anil Ambani. He was the founder of Reliance Industries. His is a proverbial sort of rags to riches story. And the Australian journalist Hamish MacDonald wrote the book. The book was banned in India for a while, and now it's available in a different avatar. This gives you a very, very detailed narrative, a very compelling narrative of how government regulations relating to the imports of raw materials and intermediates producing polyester fiber, how they were modified frequently during the 80s to ensure that Reliance became huge and its competitors were pushed to the margin. Interestingly, what happened at that point of time, we are seeing parallels today. And over the last few years, the Narendra Modi government, the way it has lifted anti-dumping duties and are essentially on a range of intermediate products like MEG, that's monoethylene glycol, and things like PTA resins, polyethylene terephthalate resins, engine coolants. Now, all of these were opposed. All of these were opposed because there were literally thousands and thousands of small units who argued that if you give protection to Reliance and also Indian Oil Corporation, you are hurting the interests of the consumer. The consumer, those who purchase a bucket, who purchase clothes, who purchase all kinds of plastic products. However, the government, not surprisingly, went along with what the big business houses wanted, and the smaller players continued to complain, but little or nothing happened. In fact, they kept trying, they kept lobbying, but they could not. I mean, for instance, there is the Polyester Textile Apparel Industry Association, and they put out a whole set of facts and figures and saying the arguments which have been put by the big corporations were not valid. But the government did not pay any heed. So at one level, you are helping big business houses in India. At another level, you have deprived users in India from getting advantage or reaping the benefit of low prices of various petrochemical products from countries like China and Taiwan and Malaysia and Indonesia, Iran, South Korea, Thailand. So this is how this has happened in recent times. The interesting part of the whole story is that now the two most powerful and richest men in India, the two big conglomerates of Adani and Ambani, are going to be in competition with each other. So far, they had sort of not encroached into each other's turf. But now it seems if and when the Mundra project comes up, it's going to be a huge project. Coal to PVC, it's going to be a highly polluting project. There have been a lot of ups and downs. When the Hindenburg research report came out, we thought the project may not come through. Now it seems again the project will come through, and this is being funded by public sector banks, by nationalized banks. They are giving money. Swati knows a lot about the subject. She's traveled in that area, and she could tell you much more than I. But what we are seeing is perhaps the two oligarchs will be competing with one another. That's yet to happen. Who knows what will happen to this regime? Who knows what will happen to the economic future of the Adani conglomerate? Because it's very, very intimately and interlinked with the fortunes of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, the rise of the Adani group, you can sort of plot it on a chart and you'll see how it's virtually mirrors the rise, the political rise of Narendra Modi. And that's where it's not just economics, it's politics that enters the picture. I just want to make a few observations and I'm going to move on because the topic talks about white lies, hidden truths, unearthing myths. There's a huge amount of illegal activity that is happening relating to the plastic waste trade in India. It's mind-boggling. The little that me and some of my colleagues have tried to dig into the whole thing, we found that it's really, we possibly have just skimmed the surface. At best, we've sort of looked at the tip of the iceberg. Now, we obtain data by paying a fairly substantial sum of money to look at how this data, how this sort of plastic scrap is coming into India. Now, it is being camouflaged. Paper, it's shown as paper, but that's actually plastic waste. And what we see is that despite the fact that per capita use of plastic in India is still substantially lower than in countries in Europe, in the United States and other countries, the imports of plastic waste continue to grow within India. And this whole idea, the notion of what is sometimes called the waste sponge, that countries like India will import plastic waste and then lower its own rate of plastic consumption. But that's actually not happening because these waste sponges are themselves contributing to high levels of plastic pollution. And the medicine has proved to be far, far worse than the disease. And what we are seeing is that though from time to time India has banned plastic waste imports, bans are again lifted because certain kinds of shortages of certain kinds of plastic waste are there, huge amount of lobbying. We see countries like the United States, the Canada have emerged as major exporters of plastic scrap to India and other South Asian countries, and they're sometimes even willing to give it to you for next to nothing or almost free. So, whereas obviously there are genuine shipments of plastic waste that are used for recycled plastic products, a lot of it is illegal and sneaked in. And there is a lot more research that needs to be done. And it's absolutely possible that the imported plastic scrap contributes to the production of items that ultimately end up in landfills. And the problem of landfills that we are seeing is there in all the major metropolitan areas in India. And whereas many recycling initiatives are underway, including converting plastic waste into building materials, and there are major concerns about microplastic pollution in India that poses health risks to everybody. We have a long, long, long way to go. What has just happened in the recent past is just the beginning, and therefore, I welcome the initiative by the CFA, the Center for Financial Accountability, and all of you in raising awareness and doing what all of us have to do to highlight the problem, and not only highlight the problem, highlight what is wrong, the lies that are being uttered by the government in international fora, and what actually is their practice. What are the hidden truths, as the Microsite subtitle says? Would we also have to suggest alternatives that could reduce the problem at the end of the day, whether it's the ban on the use of first use plastic. What we are seeing is it's contributing to greater inequality. The oligarchs, in collusion with the political establishment, they are entrenching their monopolies, and the brunt is being felt by the poor, the underprivileged users of first use plastic are those who are selling items, who for want of other work is they're self-employed and try to sell goods, including vegetables, fruits, other items to people. So this, what is happening in the plastic industry in India in particular, is reflecting the inequalities of income and wealth that we see in this country, the world's most populous country. Thank you once again for listening to me. I hope I've stuck to the time and been able to. You didn't interrupt me, so I think I did speak for around 10 or 12 minutes. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for here. So it was really insightful to hear from your 4.5 decades of experience sharing the historical, current, as well as the future landscape of petchem industries in India. So as you mentioned, it's not just the key players in negotiation, but it's also the largest players in the world, one of the largest players in the world. So also there are a lot of kind of pipeline solutions uh, burning plastic, like in a sense, waste to energy, or a lot of solutions are being put forward with because they are treating plastic as just waste management issue. So, as you mentioned, microplastics and plastics, the effects from the chemicals that are people get impacted. We are seeing on day-to-day news nowadays, like microplastics has entered our brain cells, it has entered the umbilical cord or the placenta, like the placenta and the fetus, so whatnot. So the list is getting increased day by day. It's really scary. So now I take this opportunity to invite Aarti, who's a senior research fellow in the Aarhus University, Denmark, to speak about the environmental and health impacts of burning plastic. Over to you, Aarti. Shall I share the screen? Yes.
Yes, you can. If you can, please, Vishwada. Thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, let me thank you all for this opportunity to speak here. So just to kind of give a brief introduction to add to what Vishwaja said, I'm kind of newbie to this world of plastics. So please bear with me and correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, because I've just begun my research and it is kind of scary, as Vishwaja said. So what I'm going to do today is kind of pull out a section of my PhD where I write about framings of plastics and how typically plastics get framed. So my PhD is also part of this project headed by Gauri Pathak at Aarhus University, which is called Plastics and the Anthropocene. And we're looking at the bads of goods we consume. Go on, Vishwaja, that's fine. Go to the next slide. So just everybody has been talking about the plastic life cycle, and I really wanted to take 2 minutes to kind of locate. So we've been talking about extraction, the design and the production, which are known as the upstream. If you can click one more time, it'll kind of highlight the, so these are like the upstream measures. And what Swati and Paranjoy have been talking about are the downstream measures, which are like the other aspects where you have the maintenance, the use, the disposal, and the recycling. And like they've mentioned, like a lot of work in plastics is downstream. Similarly, my work also is downstream. What I'm looking at primarily is aspects of how plastic gets used in its various forms, and also how it's managed, disposed, etc. So click and next slide. I mean, you can click twice because I just had the downstream aspects. Yeah, you can go ahead. So what we see typically when one speaks about plastics, or when the plastic crisis was kind of highlighted, was all of these images that circulated, and none of us is new to these images, right? We've seen how there was, like, how the enormity of plastics in environments has been outlined, how plastics affects animals has also been kind of constantly brought out. If you click one more time, you'll be able to see an image of a turtle, which is kind of bound up. And so what these kind of visual framings or narratives do to you is kind of highlight a singular aspect, how plastic affects us. And at this point in time, it's primarily just saying that, okay, it's accumulating in the environment. Go on, next slide. So it's a similar thing in India when you look at Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which was launched in 2014 by the ruling government. One of its agenda was also, amongst many of its agendas, was to look at waste. And I particularly look at how plastic waste got framed within this initiative. So I have a video. Next slide. I have a video. I'm not sure whether we will be able to play it. Vishuddha, will you check whether you can play the link? If it's difficult, let's not go there. I mean, I'll share the link and I'll just kind of describe what it does. Primarily, a lot of...
Isn't the screen visible? Because it's got, like, if it is visible, or is it or it's not?
No, it's not. It's just a link, but don't worry about it. If you don't have the time, I can just describe in a few words as to what the video says. The video is actually part of a campaign that was shared by the official handle. And what it does, it's kind of brings into...
Why don't you try playing it once?
Sure. I have to change the option. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, it's just a small clip. You can just play it at the... Yeah. Yeah, you can pause it now. I think this kind of gives an idea. And you can move on to the next slide. So what I wanted to highlight was a lot of Swachh Bharat Mission campaigns have been about kind of routing the waste to the bin. And that happens with plastics waste as well. You constantly kind of keep pointing out to the fact that plastics are a problem because they're not in their proper place. So the problem is primarily defined as a problem of spatial displacement. And this is true across not just policy literature, but also in posters and all the other kind of public framings of Swachh Bharat Mission that you see. What we argue in one of the papers that we've written is this kind of limited framing actually lands up encouraging toxic practices. So what we do is we kind of draw from our ethnographic research in 3 different towns in India. And what I found out was, like, in this mission to keep clean, people kind of gather plastics, but they do not often know what to do with them in places where there are inadequate infrastructures. People just land up openly burning plastics. And this happened to me across scale. Like whenever I spoke to individuals on the right, you can see I was in Arunachal Pradesh actually on a trail. And it was really interesting because the two guides that I had meticulously collected all of these plastics. And they kind of midway, just before we reached the town, kind of set the whole pile alight. And I was really surprised. And I was like, why are you guys burning plastics? And he was like, but you know what? Even if I take it to the town, it's going to be burnt anyway. So it's easier for me to burn it here where less people are exposed to it than taking it to the town. Similarly, my research, especially at the town scale, has shown that there are often inadequate infrastructures to be able to deal with this kind of plastic waste. So people typically land up burning these kind of waste. And I have like a range of images. You can just click Vishda, where you can see that people either burn these piles of waste because they're unable to stand the smell, or they're unable to kind of negotiate with other kind of health impacts that are associated typically with waste. And so you have this host of open burning that takes place. And what we're saying is, you can go ahead again, go on to the next slide. So what we're saying is we're kind of using this conceptual framework by a science and technology scholar, science and technology studies scholar called Michelle Murphy. And she writes beautifully about how regimes of perceptibility or imperceptibility are created. So while writing about sick building syndrome, she kind of typically writes about how knowledge and evidence are kind of created, and what are the kind of power structures that go into it. And what we are saying is the moment you kind of define plastic waste only along the axis of litter, it's going to determine how you deal with it. So the way you determine your solutions is going to based on how you define the problem. So when you frame plastic pollution only as a problem of litter, it's going to individualize responsibility. That's precisely what Swati and Taranjana, I think, have been talking about all this while, that this responsibility needs to be called out. Go ahead, Vishja, you can click. Similarly, all the allied kind of measures with Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, like Swachh Sarvekshan, always kind of prioritize technical solutions without really looking at what the problem is, or without really addressing the local issues that people are facing. My experience also looked at how municipalities completely just they shook off the responsibility, and they said that they were not going to collect styrofoam anymore without really banning the distribution or production of styrofoam. What does that mean? I mean, if you're not closing the tap and you're just saying, no, but I'm going to not collect it, you're individualizing the responsibility. What does that mean? How are people supposed to deal with or look at these problems? So a whole lot of people just landed up burning styrofoam because they didn't know what else to do. You can go ahead and click next again. So so the last point here really is we have to be mindful, and we also need to look at aspects beyond, look at not just throwing things into the bin, but ask important questions as to what is happening with the waste in the bin. How is it processed? Just to go on and kind of click, if you can go on to the next slide, just to point out like some of the issues with open burning of plastics. It kind of just click, Vishwaja. So it kind of highlights all the issues, how it affects human health. So, black carbon emissions from open burning are known to cause respiratory diseases like chronic bronchitis, asthma, lung cancer, cardiovascular diseases. These particles are also associated and known to act as carriers for carcinogenic polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which is PAH, again, which are linked to increased risks of birth defects. Then you have dioxins, which are known to be poisonous. They damage your immune system, developmental issues, and create reproductive problems. So these are intergenerational problems that we are talking about, not just within our lifespans, but lifespans of the generations to come. So similarly, open burning is related to a whole lot of issues that often do not get talked about. Next point again. The other problem that is often overlooked is the ash. and how it can act as a contaminant when it reaches the soil and groundwater. And I think this is exactly, again, speaks to the aspect where we were talking about, where plastic fuels infertility, where it speaks to the fact that it is kind of, in all, like, surrounding all your areas in environment, in spaces like your water, your soil, in your food chain, which we need to be mindful and careful about. Go on. What I have through the next couple of slides is just kind of examples of how different associations have put out how chemicals associated with plastics. And now this is important because we're not just talking about plastics, but we're also pointing out the whole petchem, the chemicals that often are associated um, with plastics, also impact and are known to impact human health in various ways. They're endocrine disruptors. They are associated with metabolic diseases, with neurological disorders. If you go on, again, the Science Coalition has also, I mean, this is, again, plastic and health, the hidden cost of a plastic pan, it talk about. Now I'm only highlighting the downstream, where about the use and disposal, where through the life cycle, the use also, you have microplastics that are being released all the time. So these aspects, again, go ahead, Vishwaja. And this, again, the Scientist Coalition has put out how plastics are also, like, kind of linked to the triple planetary crisis. So they are linked to climate change, they're linked to biodiversity loss, in addition to pollution as well. So, like, these are some of the issues that we are facing now. And plastics seem to be at the center of how they're connected. And there's a framework about planetary boundaries where they talk about, like, novel entities and how they affect us, and the capacity of the Earth to have these novel entities. I'm not going into the details of the science here, but just kind of to point out the different aspects that need to be looked at when you're looking at plastic pollution, especially when you're also looking at waste. Can you go to the next slide? The newest kind of report that has been put out about chemicals and additives associated with plastics. And here, really, like, I would like to end on a note where why it's really important for us to take on the precautionary principle is because there's so much that we do not know about how plastics and associated chemicals are affecting us. So in this report, I've just taken out just one of the sentences where, they found out that only about, we know only about 1/4 of the chemicals that are marketed for use in plastics have been assessed in scientific studies. So we do not even know about how the rest of it is going to affect us. And also, other aspect of it is where you also have non-intentionally added substances, which are cropping up in testing, where people are looking at chemicals associated with plastics. So it is extremely, extremely important to keep in mind the precautionary principle, because as much as we know enough to know that it affects us badly, we also do not know the whole spectrum of how much and to what extent it has the ability to affect us. So on that note, yes, I saw I'll share the paper definitely. On that note, questions, comments, responses are welcome. And thank you for this opportunity again, all of you.
Thank you, Aarti. So let's just reserve our questions and queries, everything for the last. So let's also hear from our next speaker. So thank you so much, Aarti. So you have highlighted that this is just the tip of an iceberg. So we know only a little bit of a little bit about the chemicals of concerns and their impacts on any kind of life forms, be it human beings or any other life forms or our environment in itself. So, without knowing the entirety of the issue, like we are just going on and continuing with the business as usual. So, it's while we are talking about the health impacts and the environmental impact, it's also important for us to understand how communities are directly getting impacted. Because a lot of communities, especially in country like India, they are dependent on it. The environment and ecology to flourish, and only then their livelihoods will flourish. So Now, I would like to call upon our next speaker, Devasis, who is the president of Dakshin Banga Matsya Forum, which is part of national platform for small scale fishers. So, over to you, Devasis. So, thank you.
Thank you,
I'll be
Miss.
typing in English in the chat. So yeah.
सॉरी कि इंग्लिश में हम बात नहीं कर पाएंगे तो इसलिए एक्सट्रीमली सॉरी
नहीं नहीं, मैं टाइप करती रहूंगी, आपका आप जो कह रहे हैं मैं
ओके
टाइप करती
ओके तो इसके तकलीफ आपको उठाना पड़ेगा हमारे लिए तो थैंक यू विशेषया क्योंकि पुरंजयदा आरती स्वाति बहुत अच्छे तरीके से प्लास्टिक और उनकी जो टेक्निकल और इस सब के ऊपर बात किया है तो हम ज्यादा तरीके से जो हमारी जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है दक्षिण बंग मत्स्यजीवी फोरम वेस्ट बंगाल इंडियन रीजनल वेस्ट बंगाल में वो स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी फिश वर्कर्स उनको लेकर वो उनकी काम करते हैं तो उसमें इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अंदर फिश फार्मर्स जो रिवर बेस्ड कैप्चर कल्चर क्योंकि रिवर और मेराइन दोनों तीनों सेक्टर में जो मछुआरे हैं स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी वो हमारे साथ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के साथ जुड़ा हुआ तो अभी जो प्रेजेंट सिचुएशन फिशरीज सेक्टर में क्योंकि जो सिचुएशन है वो सबको पता है मैं जस्ट मेंशन इसलिए मैं कर रहा हूं कि अभी जो प्रेजेंट सिचुएशन फिशिंग सेक्टर और फिशरीज में जो स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटीज के अंदर हम देख पा रहे हैं वो बहुत सारे इश्यूज है जैसे कि डिस्ट्रक्टिव फिशिंग मछली कम रहा है तो उसके लिए क्योंकि लास्ट 20 इयर्स तो उसको हम देखेंगे तो अब पहले देखेंगे कि 60% जो मछली वो कम हो गया है घट गया और जो मछुआरे भी हैं जो छोटे स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी उसके लैंडिंग सेंटर या नदी हो या समुद्र में वो भी 60% कम हो गया है क्योंकि मछली के साथ वो भी कम हो तो ऐसे बहुत सारे लोगों को ऐसे क्वेश्चन आ सकता है कि आप कैसे माप रहे हैं कि 60% घट गया है तो मैं एक एग्जाम्पल के हिसाब से मैं बता सकता हूं कि हमारे मंदारमनी सबको पता होगा ईस्ट मिदनापुर डिस्ट्रिक्ट में मंदारमनी टूरिज्म एरिया है उसके नजदीक एक ट्रेडिशनल फिश लैंडिंग सेंटर है दादन पात्रोबाग तो आज से 20 साल पहले जहां पे 120 बोट था या 120 बोट था तो आज के दिन में अभी आपको जाके आपको 60 या 70 आपको बोट आपको यहीं पे देखने को मिलेगा तो उसके साथ साथ जो मछुआरे हैं वो भी कम तो इसमें बहुत सारे कारण है डिस्ट्रक्टिव फिशिंग पॉल्यूशन से लेकर अनियंत्रित जो फिशिंग है तो वो सब है इसमें और एक महत्वपूर्ण जो विषय है वो है प्रजनन में क्योंकि ब्रीडिंग में उनको घट रहा है और जो कम्युनिटी है उनकी जो ऑब्जर्वेशन है वो बोल रहे हैं कि ऐसे बहुत सारे प्लास्टिक पॉल्यूशन से वो कम रहा है और उन्होंने ज्यादा तरीके से ये बता रहे हैं कि जो पॉलिस्टरीन टाइप का जो प्लास्टिक है जो थर्मोकोल हम ज्यादा तरीके से उसको यूज करते हैं थर्मोकोल पॉलिस्टरीन तो उसमें से इतना ग्रेन्यूल्स उसमें निकलता है और मछली छोटे बड़े सब मछली उसको खाते हैं उसके तहत तो उसमें उन्होंने देखा ऐसे बहुत सारे फिश हैं जिसका पेट के अंदर बहुत फाइन होता है कांच की जैसा होता है तो उसमें से उनको देखता है कि उनको उसके अंदर प्लास्टिक का ग्रेन्यूल्स उन्होंने देखा है तो उसमें से बोल रहे हैं कि इसमें से मछली भी कम हो रहा है उनको जो ऑब्जर्वेशन है तो ये जो और उसके साथ साथ क्योंकि मैं इस नदी समुन्द्र और इसमें और ज्यादा तरीके से दूसरा जो ऑब्जर्वेशन है क्योंकि हमारे कम्युनिटी में जो स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी है उनको लैंड भी चाहिए पानी भी चाहिए लैंड इसलिए चाहिए क्योंकि मछली आपको लेकर ड्राई फिश करना सॉर्टिंग करना इसके लिए आपको जमीन चाहिए तो उसमें से ज्यादा तरीके से क्या होता है कि जमीन और नदी के बीच में नदी समुद्र के नजदीक आपको ज्यादा तरीके से जो प्लास्टिक या डस्टबिन के रूप में ये दोनों यूज करते नदी समुद्र कनाल बरसाती नाला आप जो भी बोल सकते हैं बहुत आसानी से आप उसको डस्टबिन के हिसाब से आप यूज कर रहे हैं। नदी, कनाल, बरसाती नाला और रिवर, इन सबको बहुत आसानी से उनको डस्टबिन जैसा यूज कर रहे हैं। तो हमें क्या दिखने को मिलता है कि बहुत सारे प्लास्टिक हमें बहने को नदी समुद्र में बहुत बहुत नजदीक एरिया सोर्सिन में आपको दिखाई दे। तो एक कम्युनिटी के जो ऑब्जर्वेशन है वो मैं अभी हमें और क्या क्या दिखने को मिलता है, ज्यादा तरीके से पीवीसी हमारे कोस्टल एरिया में या हमारे एरिया में पीवीसी बहुत तरीके से देखने को मिलता है। पेट प्लास्टिक, तीसरा है पॉलीप्रोपिलीन, चौथा है पॉलिस्टरीन। क्योंकि पूरे जो हमारे डिस्ट्रिक्ट या स्टेट में, कोस्टल रीजन में, रिवर साइड में हमें इसको आपको देखने को मिले। तो पीवीसी तो बहुत आसान है, और इस सब में क्या होता है कि जो मैं दूसरे तरीके से मैं एक एग्जांपल, क्योंकि हल्दिया जो इंडस्ट्री है उसमें से दो एरिया है जहां पे दो इंडस्ट्री है, उसमें से एक आईओसीएल है और इंडियन ऑयल कॉर्पोरेशन लिमिटेड और एचपीसीआईएल, दो इंडस्ट्री है जहां पे एकदम हुगली रिवर के नजदीक। उसमें से मछुआरों का जो, उसमें जो मछुआरे हैं छोटे कंट्री बोट लेकर उन्होंने मछली पकड़ते हैं हुगली हल्दी रिवर में। तो और इसमें से क्या होता है कि उस मछुआरों का जो ऑब्जर्वेशन है, जो कुमार चौक बोल के एक एरिया है, सालुक खाली, झिकुर खाली, ये जो प्लेस है बहुत नजदीक इंडस्ट्री के एरिया के नजदीक, उसमें से ऐसे बोल रहे हैं कि बहुत सारे पॉल्यूटेड वाटर, ज्यादा तरीके से एचपीसीआईएल, उनकी जो पॉल्यूटेड वाटर, ब्लैक वाटर, वो उनके जमीन, उनकी तालाब मतलब पॉन्ड में बहुत आसानी से आ रहे हैं। तो उसके लिए क्या हो रहा है कि वो अपने जमीन में कोई भी खेती उगा नहीं पा रहे। दूसरा है उनकी जो पॉन्ड है, उस पॉन्ड में भी बहुत सारे ब्लैक वाटर, उनकी जो वेस्टेज वाटर है वो नदी को, उनकी पुकुर में तालाब में आ रहा है। तो उसके लिए वो कभी भी मछली वो खा नहीं सकते उनके मछली। तो अब मैंने उनको पूछा कि, या जब मीटिंग में बातचीत होता रहता है कि आपने किसके पास पहले गए, तो उन्होंने बोला कि हमने लोकल जो काउंसिलर होता है तो उसके पास हम जाते हैं। तो वो सुन के बोलता है कि ठीक है, मैं इसको अच्छे ठीक जगह से हम पहुंचा देंगे। और हल्दिया इंडस्ट्री का जितने भी पॉल्यूटेड वाटर सीधा सीधा हुगली और हल्दी रिवर के एस्चुअरी में हम गिर रहे हैं। और नदी में जो हुगली और हल्दी, मैं एक एग्जांपल के रूप से मैं बता रहा हूं कि ज्यादा मैं टाइम उसमें से जाएगा। तो मैंने उनको पूछा कि कितने प्लास्टिक, कौन से नेट में कौन सा कितने प्लास्टिक या मछली आपको आया था। सबका कहना है मछली तो कम कम है, लेकिन पिछले 20 साल के हिसाब से आप देखेंगे उन्होंने एक सोर्सिन, स्टिक सोर्सिन जो होता है, फिक्स्ड सोर्सिन जो होता है, उन्होंने बोल रहा है कि उस नेट में 900 मीटर नेट बहुत ही नजदीक रहता है, नदी के नजदीक रहते हैं, वो उसको लगाते हैं। उनको कहना है कि उसमें से 5 से 7 केजी प्लास्टिक, मछली के छोड़िए, मछली तो 2-3 केजी ऐसे होंगे, उसमें से 5 to 7 केजी प्लास्टिक पर डे उन्होंने उनको मिलता है। सेकंड, मैंने उनको बोला कि ऐसे बहुत सारे लोग हिल्सा फिश पकड़ने के लिए जाते हैं, तो उनका उनका रेट क्या है, वो जो गिल नेट यूज कर रहे हैं तो उसमें। तो उन्होंने बोला कि जो बांग्ला में इसको बोलते हैं मोरा कोटल। मोरा कोटल मीन्स आफ्टर फुल मून और न्यू मून, 3-4 दिन के बाद, फुल मून और न्यू मून के 3-4 दिन के बाद जो टाइम होता है, उस टाइम पे बहुत टाइट का जो पानी जो है वो नदी में बहुत कम होता है। तो इसलिए बोलता है कि जब हम नेट डालते हैं उस टाइम पे, वो मिट्टी के साथ एकदम मिट्टी के नजदीक नेट का जो लोअर पोर्शन है वो लग जाता। तो उसमें उनको क्या, जब वो पानी बहता है हाई टाइड में, तो ज्यादा तरीके से बॉटल, प्लास्टिक, पॉलीबैग, शू, इस तरीके से वो उसके नेट के अंदर जा रहा है। और केजी केजी प्लास्टिक, मछली तो जैसे कि हिल्सा फिश तो नहीं है नदी में, मछली मिलना बहुत मुश्किल है। हुगली और हल्दी रिवर में इतने पॉल्यूटेड एरिया, पॉल्यूशन हो रहा है, क्योंकि पॉल्यूटेड वाटर सीधा सीधा इंडस्ट्री का जा रहा है, तो मछली बिल्कुल नहीं है। तो हमसे मछली से ज्यादा हमें प्लास्टिक ही ज्यादा मिलता रहता है। और एक बार नेट डालने के बाद उनको 1 दिन या 2 दिन उनको नेट को सफाई करने में लगता है, और उनका एक डेली रूटीन होता है। तो एक रिवर साइड का, समुद्र में, क्योंकि समुद्र में और एक सिचुएशन है, जो समुद्र मैराइन फिशरीज जो फिशरमैन है उनको कहना है कि 1 से 2 किलोमीटर कोस्ट से 1 से 2 किलोमीटर के अंदर पूरा मिट्टी और उनके आसपास पूरा प्लास्टिक ही भरा हुआ। जैसे कि टूरिस्ट एरिया में, हमें क्या दिखने को मिलेगा, अभी अभी एक नया ये आया कि जो एनर्जी ड्रिंक होता है ना, टाटा का ग्लूकोज, ऐसे ऐसे कुछ एनर्जी ड्रिंक होता है, उस तरीके से ड्रिंक जो बॉटल होता है कप जैसा, वो आपको ज्यादा मिल रहा है। कोको कोला, प्लास्टिक, लेज, कुरकुरे का पैकेट इतना भर गया है कि उन्होंने समुद्र में फिक्स्ड मैग्नेट यूज कर रहे हैं। तो आपको दिन में, उन्होंने बोल रहा है कि हमें दिन में 10 से 15 केजी प्लास्टिक एक एक नेट में, क्योंकि एक एक मछुआरे के एक एक बोट में 5 फिक्स्ड बोट रहता है, 5 से 10 ऐसे केजी एक एक नेट में मिलता रहता है। तो मैंने उनको बोलता है कि जब आप लेके आ रहे हैं, जब मछली आप लैंड में लैंड कर रहे हैं, तब तो इतना प्लास्टिक नहीं रहता है, तो 1 से 2.5 केजी से 1 केजी या 1.5 केजी तक रहता है। तो उनको कहना है कि हम समुद्र में ज्यादातर इस पूरा हम वहीं पे सॉर्टिंग करके उसको गिरा देते हैं, क्योंकि प्लास्टिक हम ले नहीं सकते। तो अभी बैक नेट हो, गिल नेट हो या सोर्सिन फिक्स्ड सोर्सिन हो, हर नेट में मछली से कम ज्यादा प्लास्टिक हम आयात कर रहे हैं, तो मिल रहा है। तो ये स्मॉल स्केल जो फिशिंग कम्युनिटी है उसके सिचुएशन किनारे में इस तरीके से जा रहा है। मैं जस्ट सुंदरबन में मैं आपको एक स्टोरी में बता रहा हूँ। सुंदरबन में प्लास्टिक बैन है, सुंदरबन एरिया में। आपको फॉरेस्ट एरिया में प्लास्टिक बहुत कम मिलेगा, आपको दिखने को भी नहीं मिलेगा। लेकिन प्लास्टिक जो लोग टूरिस्ट जा रहे हैं, टूरिस्ट बोट में, उसमें से डस्टबिन है, जितने भी सारे प्लास्टिक आप क्या कर रहे हैं, वो डस्टबिन में डाल रहे हैं। रात के अंधेरे में वो डस्टबिन सीधा नदी में गिरा रहे हैं। जो टूरिस्ट लॉज है, वो गवर्नमेंट हो या प्राइवेट हो, हर सेक्टर में जो लॉज है या रेस्टोरेंट जो भी है, वो अच्छे तरीके से मेंटेन कर रहे हैं प्लास्टिक को। उन्होंने दोनों काम कर रहे हैं, एक तो कुछ प्लास्टिक को उनको जला रहे हैं और दूसरा नदी में गिरा रहे हैं। और जलाने के बाद उनकी जो वेस्टेज है वो सीधा सीधा पानी में उनको बह रहा है। तो उसमें से क्या होता है कि पूरे मछुआरों का ये कहना है, जब इस तरीके से पानी या समुद्र कैनल में गिर रहा है, तो उसमें से हम जाने, मतलब मछली का जो आयात और आसपास मछली आना बंद हो जाए। तो और ऐसे जहां पे नहीं भी है, जैसे कि हम उसमें सुंदरबन एरिया में, क्योंकि ऊपर से भी प्लास्टिक आ रहे हैं समुद्र के, नदी के अंदर समुद्र में जा रहे हैं। तो और क्योंकि वेस्ट बंगाल में कनाल और बरसाती नाला इस तरीके से बहुत छोटे बड़े सब जगह भरा हुआ है, उसमें से आपको हर स्टेट में, हर एरिया में आपको इस चीज को आपको दिखने को मिलेगा। मैं इसलिए बोल रहा हूं कि ये, क्योंकि जहां पे पानी वो देख रहा है तो उसको लगता है कि ये डस्टबिन ही है, तो ये डस्टबिन जैसा वो यूज कर रहे हैं। तो प्रॉब्लम यहीं पे है। और मुझे लगता है कि अभी जो लाइव और लाइवलीहुड का जो अभी स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी का जो अभी संकट स्थिति है, इसमें से प्लास्टिक पॉल्यूशन एक बड़ा कारण है। तो हमने बहुत बार कोशिश किया, जो मैं खुद का भी ये कर सकता हूँ, जैसे पॉलीस्टाइरीन, ऐसे बहुत सारे मछुआरों के पास बोट खरीदने का या बोट बनाने का उनको कोई तरीका नहीं होता है। वो बहुत इजीली वो थर्मोकोल यूज कर रहे हैं। वो नॉर्थ बंगाल हो सकता है, साउथ बंगाल हो सकता है, हर एरिया में बहुत आसानी से पॉलीस्टाइरीन को यूज कर रहे हैं। तो उसमें से ज्यादा तरीके से बहुत वो हमारे जो मत्स्य संपदा के ऊपर, वो भी एक बहुत बड़ा कारण है डैमेज, लॉस होने का। तो ये सब एक कारण है। मुझे लग रहा है कि हमारे तरफ से हमने बहुत बार कोशिश किया कि डिपार्टमेंट और पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड को इसमें इन्वॉल्व करने का, लेकिन मैं लास्ट एक हफ्ता पहले हमने दो बार ऐसे हल्दिया पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल, हल्दिया जो पॉल्यूटेड वाटर है इंडस्ट्री का, तो उसका पानी सीधा नदी और समुद्र नदी में गिर रहा है। तो हमने डिपार्टमेंट और पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड को हमने चिट्ठी लिखा कि इस तरीके से आ रहा है। तो उसके बाद हमने फॉलो अप चिट्ठी लिखा कि इस तरीके से मछुआरे फेस कर रहे हैं और एकदम सबको दिखाई दे रहा है कि इस तरीके से ब्लैक वाटर और पॉल्यूटेड वाटर ऐसे नदी में गिर रहा है, तो उसके आसपास मछली नहीं मिल रहा है कुछ इलाका में, और कुछ मछली मिलता भी है उसके अंदर इतना स्मेल बदबू आ रहा है, तो वो मार्केट में लेके जा नहीं पा रहा है। तो इसलिए तो डिपार्टमेंट की तरफ से, मतलब डिपार्टमेंट मतलब फिशरीज डिपार्टमेंट की तरफ से एक हफ्ता पहले एक चिट्ठी दिया कि कौन से इंडस्ट्री पॉल्यूटेड वाटर नदी नदी में गिरा रहे हैं, उसका नाम दीजिए। हल्दिया में इतना बहुत सारे 100 के ऊपर इंडस्ट्री हैं, सभी सभी प्रकार के इंडस्ट्री हैं, तो उसमें से कौन सा इंडस्ट्री वो हमें चुन के देना पड़ेगा, तो उसके ऊपर कार्रवाई हो। तो इस तरीके से मजाक हो रहा है। जैसे कि हमने मंदारमनी एरिया में जो टूरिज्म एरिया है, सागर आइलैंड में, सुंदरबन में, क्योंकि हमें जो डिस्ट्रक्टिव फिशिंग और ये सब होता है पॉल्यूटेड, जब हम पॉल्यूशन की बात करते हैं तो वो बोल रहे हैं कि हम मैनेजमेंट कर रहे हैं। हर तरीके से बात इस तरीके से आ रहा है कि हाँ हम तो मैनेजमेंट कर रहे हैं, हम वेस्ट कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं, उसके बाद क्या हो रहा है, कलेक्ट करने के बाद ये जला रहे हैं, नहीं तो दूसरे एरिया से वो नदी या समुद्र में बहा रहे हैं। हर एरिया में जो छोटे मछुआरे हैं, क्योंकि वो नियर शोर एरिया में मछली पकड़ रहे हैं, जो स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी है, वो टूरिस्ट के कारण हो, पॉल्यूशन इंडस्ट्री पॉल्यूटेड पॉल्यूशन के कारण हो, प्लास्टिक पॉल्यूशन हो, हर कारण के लिए उनकी लाइफ और लाइवलीहुड के ऊपर एक बहुत बड़ा थ्रेट है। तो क्योंकि कुछ दिन पहले बजट में आत्मनिर्भर की भारत की घोषणा किया गया था। मुझे लगता है कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत के ज्यादा आत्म सम्मान की बात, क्योंकि उसमें ज्यादा ध्यान देना चाहिए, क्योंकि आत्मसम्मान इन सब के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है कि हम क्या कर रहे हैं क्या नहीं कर रहे हैं। तो ये भी, क्योंकि प्लास्टिक को हम किस तरीके से यूज करेंगे, तो कैसे यूज करेंगे, या जरूरत है या नहीं, ये भी हमें देखना पड़ेगा। तो जो स्मॉल स्केल, मैं लास्ट में बोलूंगा कि जो स्मॉल स्केल फिशिंग कम्युनिटी है वो अभी लड़ रहे हैं इस पोल्यूशन के कारण, इस पोल्यूशन के खिलाफ वो लड़ रहे हैं, लेकिन इसके कारण भी उनकी लाइफ और लाइवलीहुड के ऊपर बहुत बड़ा एक थ्रेट है। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much, Darasasti. So it was really insightful, and to hear from you that plastic is the big part of current issue for fishers in actually surviving as well as in terms of livelihood. It's really like hard to see how in all fronts the environment as well as the lives and livelihoods are getting affected. It's not just the plastics alone. Like while we are saying the entire life cycle is a problem, here we can see it as a living example, because you are talking about the haldia chemicals which is contaminating the land, air, and water, which is giving tough time for fisher folks as well as farmers to use the environment for their livelihoods. And also you're talking about how the waste management, like picking in an area which is banned for plastics, we can see a lot of plastics, and burning, collecting them and burning or dumping somewhere is again a problem. So thank you so much for sharing the work and the experience that you have with us. So thank you once again. I now ask Joe to take over the platform to share his concluding remarks and highlight the importance of the campaign. And thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Vishara. I mean, after Swati giving a context for the microsite, and after hearing Aarti, Dada, and Debashish, I don't think, I mean, those have been such rich, presentations that I don't have much to kind of add to it. I mean, I just want to kind of say a couple of points that one of the reasons that we also wanted to kind of have this site and put things together in one place is because of the contradiction the Indian government is kind of contradiction coming out in what it's kind of pronouncing and what they are kind of doing. I mean, our honorable Prime Minister goes to cope and says about Panchamrita and all those kind of great things. And back home, he's kind of helping his dear friend, as Paranjoy already kind of said about it, to promote this kind of bad projects. I mean, the largest Adani, the largest promoter of RE projects, is also the largest promoter of coal projects. I mean, today I was just reading one of the reports that even the Adani Green Energy Limited company is a collateral to kind of raise credit facility for coal projects in the country. So they are leveraging even the kind of coal, renewable energy projects and green energy projects to promote coal in a very big way. Aarti very well articulated this. I mean, plastic is seen as a problem of disposal. I mean, it's considered to be just a pollution which needs to be kind of better managed and better this thing. I mean, it's not traced back to even, I mean, I don't know, more or less or whatever. The fossil fuels, it's not connected to fossil fuels, it's not kind of traced back to fossil fuels. And this microsite is trying to kind of do that. I mean, the connection between the fossil fuel and the plastics, which is beyond just a pollution issue, it's beyond just a kind of a disposal issue, and whether we wash it and dry it and give to somebody so that we assume that it is recycled, while we all know that that's just a myth when it comes to the larger picture. Swati also kind of mentioned that this is a space that we want to collaboratively develop over a period of time. I mean, this is not just CFA site, it's a space to kind of collaborate. It's a space to kind of bring together our resources to kind of highlight this rather complicated issue, to bring attention on this issue, whether it's media, researchers, general public, whoever it is. So this is also an invitation for everybody to kind of contribute to this. How we can do it, we all know about it, whether you write for it, you share your published articles there, share your interviews. I mean, a lot of ways in which you can kind of, and also share this link with others, wherever you have networks and organizations. So this is a space for collaboration and bringing the work together. And the final thing is that please do not see this as CFA's campaign. This is not CFA's campaign. It's going to be our campaign. I mean, we need to kind of collectively do it. It's not one organization. It's not any one organization's work which can kind of bring any change. So please consider also please take the ownership of this campaign yourself, and we will be allies and we will kind of work together on this. So thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for all the presentators. I mean, who did an amazing job, which really kind of enlightened us far deeply. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for sharing the importance of this site and one place to go to for all the resources like that we would like to look upon and work and share. So now it is open. The platform is open for questions, and you can ask your questions. Like, you can type it on the chat box or raise your hands. So that we'll know the queue, and then one by one you can unmute and ask questions to any of the speakers.
While people are thinking, I actually had some questions, so I'm going to pose them while other members can think of what you'll have. But I had one question each for all our three guests. To Paranjoy, my question was, we understand the reliance and the Adani Ambani nexus that's happening. However, we're also seeing that all the public sector oil companies are also expanding. There's a lot more investments coming into the sector as well. And that's also a little more frightening, because that's also a lot of public finance. It's from budgetary allocations and other levies and funds that the government collects. And that's a bit of a worry, that this fertility is being sponsored by the government. So how do you see that expansion, and how do you see the relationship between the public sector expansion in the petrochemical industry on the one hand and the private sector, and what jugalbandi do you envisage is going to happen there in the future? I'll just ask all three questions and then stop. To Aarti, my question was that we're seeing a lot of techno fixes emerging, especially in the downstream. What's your take on that? How do you see that becoming a louder fall solution than they already, are? Also, this thing of out of sight, out of mind, let's just burn the waste and it disappears. So, and there are other forms, there's pyrolysis coming in, etc. So, how do you see other end of pipeline solutions? और देबाशीष आपके लिए एक सवाल मेरा ये था कि आजकल जस्ट ट्रांजिशन पर बहुत ज्यादा बातचीत होती है कि जो फिलहाल का जो ढांचा है उससे हटके हम कैसे हम कैसे जो फिलहाल की परिस्थिति है एनर्जी का या फिर चीजों का, उससे हटके कैसे एक नया व्यवस्था ला सकते हैं. कोई कैपिटलिज्म को टक्कर देने की बात नहीं कर रहा है, लेकिन जस्ट ट्रांजिशन की जो है उससे हम कैसे एक न्यायपूर्वक तरीके से हम शिफ्ट कर सकें. इस संदर्भ में आपको क्या लग रहा है कि जो हल्दिया में पेट्रोकेमिकल की रिफाइनरीज हैं उनके चलते जो पोल्यूशन है या उनका दबदबा भी है, अगर उससे निजात पाना हो तो हम क्या कर सकते हैं? क्या उनका बंद कराना एक बहुत ऐसा खास सपना है कि कभी नहीं साकार हो सकता, या फिर बस यही कर सकते हैं कि पोल्यूशन को कंट्रोल करें? क्या हल हो सकता है? और इसको सोचे बगैर कि पॉसिबल है कि नहीं, लेकिन वाकई में एक समाज की जरूरत के लिए एक हल जो है वो क्या होगी? अगर आप थोड़ा उस पर खास करके हल्दिया की पेट्रोकेमिकल की रिफाइनरीज के संदर्भ में अगर आप थोड़ा उस पर भी मछुआरों का क्या सोच है? क्या वो चाहते हैं कि वो बंद हो जाए? क्या वो चाहते हैं कि वो बेहतर हो जाए? क्या वो चाहते हैं कि ज्यादा नौकरियां उनको मिले? लोगों का क्या मंशा है, क्या सोच है? उसके बारे में अगर आप बात रख सके. इसलिए भी मैं पूछ रही हूँ क्योंकि इंडस्ट्री का सबसे ज्यादा डंका यही है कि ये नौकरियां दिलाता है और हमें पता है कि असल में ये नौकरियां दिलाता नहीं है. तो स्थानीय लोगों की क्या समझ है उस पर थोड़ा गौर करें, because there are people from other parts. I'm just also folks from Bangladesh, so I just want to translate what I asked Devashish, is that in the context of just transition, because Haldia has a massive refinery build up over there, what is the kind of just transition that the fish workers would envisage over there? These were my three questions, and of course more questions can follow. Thanks. Yeah, Paranjay.
How long do you want me to speak?
As long as people are willing to remain. We've gone from 3 to 25, so perhaps, yeah.
You're not paying me to speak, so I'm not going to give me a time limit. This is a huge subject, what you brought about.
5 minutes?
Okay, 5 minutes. This notion, you must not be simplistic to look at it in terms of binaries. Capitalism, socialism, capitalism, communism, public sector, private sector. I think you have to take a far more nuanced view. Let me speak specifically about India. It was said that from the time of Pandit Nehru, Indira Gandhi was supposed to be a socialist. Nehru was supposed to be a socialist. And the left at that time were critical of Indira Gandhi and Pandit Nehru for, at the same time, pandering to big business. Even Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi was said, he was killed, in fact, at the home of Ghanshyam Das Birla on the 30th of January, 1948. So the nexus between business and politics is neither new nor is it unique to India. But when you look at it in the Indian context, whether it be the growth of the public sector or the growth of the private sector, we've reached a stage where we cannot take a simple view. Right through the 60s, right through the 70s and the 80s, it was often said, what is public about our public sector? It was run effectively as if it was the personal fiefdoms, the jagirs and the zamindaris of the netas and the babus. That is one. And then it was said, what was private about our private sector? If the nationalized banks and the then development financial institutions had not loaned huge monies to the companies in the Tata Group and the Birlas and all the other big business houses, they wouldn't have been able to expand. In fact, the entire Swaraj Paul episode of the 80s highlighted something, that the reason why promoter groups or families could control large enterprises, large certainly by Indian standards, was because they had the support of public financial institutions, whether it be the Life Insurance Corporation or the State Bank of India or the Unit Trust of India. And in fact, the entire episode involving Swaraj Paul's hostile takeover of DCM and escorts, why it was thwarted, and this was during Rajiv Gandhi's time and Indira Gandhi's time, is because though these companies were nominally owned by, controlled by private individuals, they were actually de facto dependent on public money. So this whole notion of ownership and control, we have to take again a nuanced view. You can control large enterprises by owning a small amount. It used to be a joke once upon a time. It's perhaps an apocryphal story that the largest family that owned shares in Tata Steel were the Birla Group. So the point is, we have to look at it, differentiate between control and ownership. Coming now to what's happening in India, you must not separate the interests of big business from that of the government, especially in the last 10 years and a little longer. If right from the 90s, right from the 90s, when it was said once the Indian economy liberalizes and you're going to see competition, that never happened. We found crony capitalism. The rise of Ambani's was, right through the decade of the 80s and the decade of the 90s are classic examples of crony capitalism, where the capitalist is able to expand because the capitalist is being helped by the government in framing rules and framing regulations. I've talked about this earlier. Let's move on a little further now. For the last 10 years, we've had the Narendra Modi government, which more than the Vajpayee government, and certainly more than the Congress-led governments, are far more right of center than Indian governments have been. They swear by privatization. They swear that everything the public sector do, the private sector can do better. If there is any doctrinaire position, ideological, it is that of the government. Now, look specifically at the question that you ask about the Jugalbandi, about, Ambani, Adani. Will they be competing with each other? It's a difficult question, but time alone can tell. But there are two issues which are worth talking about. And here I want to bring in the issue of plastics. But before that, the two biggest controversies that are currently economic controversies in the country is this entire Bangladesh episode, where you have coal coming in from Australia, from a mine mined by Adani. It travels by ship 9,000 kilometers to a port in Orissa, Dhamra, which is controlled by Adani, and then it goes by a rail, a leased line, to Jharkhand, Godda, where you generate electricity and export it to Bangladesh. There is no project anywhere in the world of this kind. Because of the regime change that has taken place in Dhaka, this has become a huge controversy. And within a week of Sheikh Hasina flying to Delhi, you find that the government of India has changed the rules to enable Adani's Godda project to sell that electricity in India. So these are classic cases of crony capitalism. And in fact, we are gone beyond crony capitalism. We've reached a stage where we can call them oligarchs. And therefore, the phrase that is being used by the opposition, including the leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, is Modani. You're conflating Modi and Adani. It's one word. And I didn't say it because if I said something like this, there would be a seventh defamation case against me by Mr. Adani's lawyers. But it was Arvind Kejriwal, the Chief Minister of Delhi, who is in jail as we talk. He had a special session of the Delhi Legislative Assembly, and he said clearly, not I, but he said that he had heard from a leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and he spoke in Hindi. ये पैसा ये तो अडानी जी का नहीं है, ये कंपनी ये तो अडानी जी का नहीं है, ये तो मोदी जी का है. Now you can't be any more, what should I say, upfront. You can't be any more direct than what Arvind Kejriwal said. Like him, don't like him is another issue. Finally, I'll conclude by talking about one of the most controversial projects that are going on right now in Mumbai, India's financial capital, India's trade capital, India's entertainment capital. In the heart of Mumbai is one of the most densely populated parts of planet Earth. It's a place called Dharavi. It's roughly 2.5 square kilometers, close to 1 million people live. Now, the government has given a contract to redevelop this. Okay. Now, if any of you are interested in some detail about this, I've made a documentary film. It runs into 45 minutes. Dharavi Ka Dada Kaun. Have a look at it. It's available in Hindi and English. Dharavi Ka Dada is Adani. The question is, will Adani become India's the biggest real estate baron? Now, Dharavi is not just where people live. There are tens of thousands of small-scale units which run out of Dharavi. And one of the most important things that they do is recycle plastics. I mean, there is perhaps no place on this planet where old pens, you name any and every kind of plastic waste which is recycled and remade. And that's happening in Dharavi. And if those people are removed, if those industries are relocated, what happened? This is the heart of Mumbai, India's commercial center, financial center. Now, the rules have been tweaked in such a manner, and the other real estate barons are not exactly delighted, and we don't know what will have to happen to this particular scheme or the project, because elections are going to take place in Maharashtra in the next few months. And Dharavi, which is described as Asia's biggest slum, India's biggest slum, shantytown, Jodhpur, and the world's biggest slum. How will it be redeveloped? How should it be redeveloped? Do you snatch away the livelihoods of people and importantly, the recyclers? Once again, this Dharavi and what's happened in Dharavi become a metaphor of what's happening in India. And I must say, I'm not uniformly pessimistic about what's happening in India. I mean, we haven't had a regime change, but we've seen the Modi 3 far more weaker. I mean, there is a difference between 303 members of parliament belonging to the BJP and 240, where the halfway mark is 272. So how this government works or does not work, what happens in the assembly elections that are going to take place in the coming months, all of these would have a profound impact on the political economy of India, and therefore the fortunes of both Ambani and Adani, the two of the biggest producers of plastics, plastic intermediates, plastic raw materials in India and in the world. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you, Pranjita. Thank you so much. I'm sure we could have gone on. It's a large topic, but yeah. Perhaps at the end.
दो क्वेश्चन है.
जी बिल्कुल.
एक तो है न्यायपूर्वक व्यवस्थापना या मैनेजमेंट हम क्या किस तरीके से कर सकते हैं. मैं पहले तो मछुआरों की बात करूंगा क्योंकि वो खुद जानते हैं, क्योंकि वो उसके पास एक ज्ञान है कि नॉलेज है कि हाँ प्लास्टिक या प्लास्टिक रिलेटेड या पॉल्यूटेड वाटर वो उनकी लाइवलीहुड के ऊपर एक डैमेज करना या उनके लॉस होना सबसे बड़ा अहम कारण हो सकता है. ऐसे बहुत सारे कारण हैं, ये भी एक कारण है. तो जो न्यायपूर्वक, मैं इसलिए मैंने बोला था कि आत्मसम्मान, क्योंकि हम कहाँ पे किस तरीके से कौन सा चीज या क्या यूज कर रहे हैं और क्या करना चाहिए, ये हमारे अंदर से इसकी एक अवेयरनेस या इसके लिए एक शिक्षा हमें पहले से इस शुरुआत करना चाहिए। ये केवल नहीं है कि हम आज से तय कर रहे हैं कि हमारे गांव में प्लास्टिक बंद हो जाए, संभव बिल्कुल नहीं, इम्पॉसिबल। क्योंकि हमारे गांव में 1,500 2,000 लोग हैं, तो उसमें से 500 लोग आपके साथ देंगे, बाकी 1,500 लोग आपको साथ नहीं देंगे, क्योंकि उनकी उनकी जीवन के अंदर ही एक प्रैक्टिस आ गया है प्लास्टिक निर्भर से। क्योंकि आप देखेंगे कि हम ही खुद लोग, जैसे कि हमारे दादा परदादा ने एक अच्छे तरीके से एक मैनेजमेंट उनके सिस्टम कि घर में कौन सी चीज किस तरीके से कहां पे रखेंगे, उसकी मैनेजमेंट, खेती में कौन सी चीज किस तरीके से मैनेजमेंट होता है, तो वो उनकी प्रैक्टिस में था। जैसे कि जो पैडी यूज करने के बाद स्टिक जो है, तो उसको ऐसे काऊ का जो डंग, काऊ डंग है, उसको इस तरीके से बहुत सारे चीज हैं जो वेस्ट, उसको भी अच्छे तरीके से मैनेजमेंट हो। और ऐसे प्लास्टिक को उस टाइम पे भी जो भी थोड़ा सा भी उनको मिलता था, तब उनको अलग तरीके से उनको सेग्रीगेटेड किया जाता है। आज के दिन में ऐसे मैनेजमेंट हम खुद लेके आ गए हैं अपने प्रैक्टिस से, क्योंकि हम शॉर्टकट में ज्यादा विश्वास करते हैं। कितने कम समय में कितने को क्या यूज कर सकते हैं, कितना कम समय में ज्यादा फायदा हम ले सकते हैं, हमारे प्रैक्टिस में, हमारे सोच में ऐसे आ गया है। तो मुश्किल यही होता है कि हम, जैसे कि आरती ने वो स्वच्छ भारत का ऐसे वो दिखा रहा था, बहुत आसानी से वो फेंक रहा है, बहुत आसानी से फेंक रहा है। तो हम समुद्र के किनारे कोई भी कहीं पे भी कोई भी हम प्लास्टिक नहीं दिखा रहे हैं, तो प्लास्टिक बोरे में प्लास्टिक हम खुद लेके जा रहे हैं। तो वो कौन इसका एडवर्टाइजमेंट कौन कर रहा है? ना हमारे खुद का प्रधानमंत्री वो एडवर्टाइजमेंट को। तो लोगों के पास जो मैसेज जाना वो ठीक से नहीं हुई। तो मैं इसलिए बोल रहा हूं कि कम्युनिटी के पास ये नॉलेज है कि वो जानता भी है कि हमें इसको एक नए, जो आपने बोला है कि न्यायपूर्वक जो मैनेजमेंट होना चाहिए, वो होना चाहिए। इसलिए इस तरीके से होना चाहिए क्योंकि उनको पहले से ही आपको ये करना है कि प्लास्टिक अपने आम लोगों को उसको पहले कंट्रोल में लेके आना पड़े, कंट्रोल में। कि हमें तय करना है कि आज मैं, जहां पे पॉलीबैग हम दिल्ली में हम 3 यूज करते थे, आज मैं 2 करूंगा। एक हफ्ता के बाद ये तय करूंगा कि हम 3 करेंगे। आज एक हफ्ता में एक भी पानी का बोतल हम नहीं खरीदेंगे। तो जब इस तरीके से हमारे सोच के अंदर इस प्रैक्टिस को आएंगे और धीरे धीरे वो बढ़ता जाएगा, तो मुझे लगता है कि इसके ऊपर एक सोच, या वो क्लासरूम में हो सकता है, क्लास के बाहर एक अवेयरनेस आपको पहले यहीं पे बिल्डअप करना। सेकेंड, जो सरकार के तरफ से जो नीतियां, पॉलिसियां हैं, रूल्स हैं, रेगुलेशन जो भी हैं, उसको आपको ऑनेस्टली उसको आपको लागू करना पड़ेगा। और गवर्नमेंट को एक इनिशिएटिव, नागरिक के साथ एक इनिशिएटिव गवर्नमेंट को भी लेना पड़ेगा। सिर्फ एक रूल्स, पार्लियामेंट में आप एक रूल्स लेके आ गए, एक्ट लेके आ गए हैं कि कोई भी इंडस्ट्री, आप पॉल्यूटेड वाटर आप सीधा नहीं छोड़ सकते हैं, इसको मैनेजमेंट और एक व्यवस्था करके आपको छोड़ना पड़ेगा। आप ऐसे नहीं कर सकते। तो ऐसे बहुत सारे रेगुलेशन है। पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड भी कंट्रोल करने के लिए बनाया गया है। तो वो अभी कोई भी पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड अभी कोई भी कंट्रोल नहीं कर पा रहा है। सबसे बड़ा कारण ये भी है। तो मुझे लगता है कि इस मैनेजमेंट को हमें ग्रेस रूट से आपको धीरे धीरे लेके जाना पड़ेगा, जहां अंत में नागरिक और मेरे हिसाब से गवर्नमेंट को जो पॉलिसी, उनको रिएक्ट और रूल्स है, उसको भी ऑनेस्टली लागू करना पड़ेगा। तो ये मेरा पहला है। दूसरा जो है कि हल्दिया में पेट्रोकेमिकल इंडस्ट्री 2 हैं, और भी बहुत सारे ऐसे इंडस्ट्री हैं जो पॉलीबैग और पॉलीथीन ऐसे रिलेटेड ऐसे उनको प्रोडक्शन वहीं पे हो रहा है। तो मैंने तो एक एग्जांपल के रूप से मैंने ये बोला था कि किस तरीके से पॉल्यूटेड। मुझे लग रहा है कि सबके पास ये समस्या है लेकिन ये जो कंट्रोल नहीं करना, हम खुद ही बोल रहे हैं कि वेस्टेज वाटर वो सीधा डाल रहे हैं, पॉल्यूटेड वाटर क्यों छोड़ रहे हैं? क्योंकि वो उनके पास जानकारी है कि वो पॉल्यूटेड वाटर छोड़ रहे हैं। लेकिन ये भी एक अर्थनीति है, इकोनॉमिक्स यहीं पे भी है। तो और जो मूवमेंट है, लड़ाई है, ये लड़ाई टक्कर समान समान इक्वल नहीं है, क्योंकि वो बहुत ऊपर है और हम बहुत नीचे हैं। हुगली रिवर में या हल्दी रिवर में करीब करीब 400 या 300 बोट होंगे फिश वर्कर्स, उसमें से 5, 7, 10 हजार लोग हैं जो उसके ऊपर निर्भर होता है। लेकिन उसमें उनका कंट्रीब्यूशन जो है वो कितना है और उसका इंडस्ट्री का कितना है, ये जो मैं उसके लिए मैं बोल रहा हूं कि ये जो लड़ाई मूवमेंट है वो इक्वल नहीं है, हमारे बस की बात नहीं है। नंबर पे 2 है। और ये जो मैं इकोनॉमिक्स का मैं बात कर रहा हूं, इसको भी आपको संज्ञान में लेते हुए मैं इसको भी लेना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि ये इरेगुलरिटी जो हो रहा है या कंट्रोल नहीं हो पा रहा है, कि इसके पीछे एक अर्थनीति, हम उसको नियंत्रण कंट्रोल करने के लिए बोलेंगे आपको पॉल्यूटेड वाटर मत छोड़िए, इसको अच्छे करके या जो भी आपका रूल रेगुलेशन है वो करके आप भेजिए, वो नहीं कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि उनके लिए जो खर्चा होगा वो कहां से खर्चा जो होगा, क्योंकि उनके लिए भी खर्चा बढ़ जाएगा। तो ये भी एक कारण है, तो इसलिए नहीं हो पा रहा है। तो ऐसे में क्या होता है कि जब तक कोई भी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी, जैसे कि आज एक आरजीकर के कारण जिस तरीके से सारे देश भर में या दुनिया में जिस तरीके से लोग रास्ते में आ गए हैं, ऐसे मूवमेंट हो रहे हैं, तो मुझे लग रहा है कि जब तक लोग इसको नहीं समझेंगे, वो एनवायरमेंट हो, क्लाइमेट जस्टिस जो भी हो, एनवायरमेंट और इनके ऊपर जब तक लोग रास्ते में नहीं आएंगे, तब तक ऐसे बदलाव नहीं आ सकते हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि एक दिन आएंगे, ऐसे दिन आएगा, तो आएंगे जब तक वो कुछ नहीं बचेगा, जब लोग आएंगे तब तक कुछ नहीं बचेगा, क्योंकि हमारे कैनेल हो, रिवर हो, समंदर हो, वो सब ड्रेनेज बन गया है, क्योंकि वो सब ड्रेनेज बन गया है, तो उसमें और हमारे कुछ बचा नहीं, जो भी है थोड़ा बचा है वो अपने तरीके से। और मैं लास्ट में एक बोलूंगा कि सब लोग बोलते हैं कि मछुआरे छोटे मछुआरे हैं, वो अपने लाइवलीहुड के लिए बात कर रहे हैं, नहीं, ये इंडिकेशन है। समुन्द्र नदी में कोस्ट में कितने स्मॉल स्केल फिशरमैन हैं, उसके इंडिकेशन, उसकी नदी, रिवर, नदी, समुन्द्र और कोस्ट, ये तीनों में उनका हेल्थ कंडीशन हमारे तो ऊपर रहना, हमारे रहना उसके ऊपर ही डिपेंड करता है। 20 साल 30 साल पहले कितने लोग पोस्ट में रहता था, या कितने लोग मछली मारी कर रहे थे, और आज कितने लोग कर रहे हैं, वो क्यों नहीं है, क्यों कम है, वो उसका जो हेल्थ कंडीशन, छोटे मछुआरे के उनकी लाइवलीहुड के ऊपर वो डिपेंड, आपको वो एक इंडिकेशन है, वो भी देखना पड़ेगा।
बहुत शुक्रिया देवाशीष, बहुत सारे लेयर्स आपने निकाले इसमें, बहुत धन्यवाद। और ये एक चर्चा आगे बढ़ाने की भी जरूरत है, मछुआरों की पूरे एक मूवमेंट में। हमें लग रहा है कि इसके भाव बहुत है, उतना चर्चा हो नहीं रहा है, वो पेट्रोकेमिस्ट्री की बात हो या प्लास्टिक की भी, तो जरूरी है। सॉरी आरती।
Yeah, thank you. I mean, again, that's a huge, huge question that you asked, kind of about techno fixes in waste management. And to be very honest, I am like a fence-sitting person right now with this regard for two reasons. Because I think in the way that I've come to understand and comprehend this issue is also across two levels. One is where you look at technology itself as this beast, because once you put it in place, which means you have to kind of feed it with this much amount of plastics, and so it creates kind of lock-ins, and I think a lot of people have spoken about this, written about this, in the way in which once you put technologies in place, you kind of have to change everything around it to suit the technology. And I'm going to take a bit of a tangent to kind of just elaborate how this functions. So I just very recently went to a green museum here, and they were talking about this whole change in technology in agricultural segment, where you went from the sickle to the tractor. And initially, I was like, just looking at it, but experientially, when you feel it, the relationship, when a person is kind of harvesting with a sickle as opposed to a tractor, is very different. The way you feel the soil, so there's like an entire segment of more than human that now you encounter in a very different way. And the most, like the thing that hit me the most was the fact that because they had tractors at a particular height, they actually had to change the crops. So they mutated the crops to only grow at a particular height. And I was like, here you are actually, altering life to suit the technologies. And I think I might draw that kind of parallel to kind of, elucidate. Once you have techno fixes, they are not as simple. You have to do a lot of other things to keep those technological fixes functional. The reason I say that I am sitting on the fence with this is because I have also seen firsthand affinities that people have with kind of open burning, where you feel that maybe if this is such a problem, maybe a closed incinerator or a pyrolysis might actually be a better way of dealing with things. So it's a really difficult one to answer, because I mean, I am still not aware of the scale that you guys are speaking of. So there is lots that I need to unpack for myself in terms of being able to understand the broader politics that's at work at all of these levels. Because even at the end of the day, when you have technological fixes, you are going to have all of these entanglements as to who is running these technologies. What are the things that are part of these? Where is the ash going? How, do we even know what that ash consists of? So there's like just a whole gamut of questions and answers that we are not sure we are really prepped to even answer. And that is why I'm sorry that I do not have an answer for you, but it's just like it's just opened up a whole thought segment for me where it's an exercise as to understand how do we do things. Because I think rightly, as Debashish was also pointing out, some of these issues and questions are extremely complex. We don't even know ways in which we are entangled with plastics, where we also have to look at aspects of labor and convenience and infrastructures that we don't yet completely know. So how are we going to kind of look through these nexus that are extremely complex to be able to make sense of things, to be able to even talk about just transitions? Because I still laugh at this term called just transitions, because what are the time frames that you're looking at? Who is it just for? Like where do we draw a line as to, it is, I mean, these issues are like really, really, I'm sorry, but I mean, these are overwhelming at times when I'm looking at these closely. So I'm sorry to not have answered your question, but I hope this kind of, gives you the gist of where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I don't think there is a simple answer, like you actually rightly said. And I mean, I know people are dropping off very quickly, so we should also close this. But I just wanted to also say that, I mean, I've been reading a lot about just the history of petrochemicals, and everything that we've spoken about today, every single thing that we've spoken about today, has been written about in the 1970s by academicians and economists of those times. And there is an entire writing on this whole thing of over capacity and standard assets, and how it's the nature of the industry, and how the industry ensured that as the chemists were producing the plastics, the companies were also creating markets. So this is a very big issue. And like I will say, what Devashi said is that the people who are spearheading this, the polymers and petrochemicals, are far bigger than us, and it will take a lot more and lot more of us to fight and push back. So it can be overwhelming, and often we also caught up with that. But we have to somehow break through that thick cloud of being overwhelmed and find little rays of piercing, the darkness. So yeah, I'm thankful to all those who stayed back. We are a handful of people by now. But thanks for staying and being here. I am very enriched. I do this and nothing but this all day long. But I learned so much today, and I hope everyone else also has gone back with something or the other to take into their work and lives.